We are happy to have you all here with us this evening again to celebrate this wonderful exhibition. This show tells a story of how an unconventional style of education developed in Oklahoma created a surprising connection to architectural practices in California and left a lasting influence on the architectural imagination of the American West. Before I introduce our curators this evening, I wanted to spend a few special thanks to each of our supporters who helped make this show possible. First off, the Kirkpatrick Family Fund, Oklahoma Arts Council, Allied Arts, Art Desk, Annie Bohannon, the Chickasaw Nation, the E.L. and Thelma Gaylord Foundation, Leslie and Cliff Hudson, the Kennedy family, Barbara and Edward Craig, George Records, Cindy and Lance Ruffle, SSM Health St. Anthony Hospital, Velocigo, and Visit Oklahoma City. Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the curators who are going to be facilitating our discussion this evening. First off is Dr. Angela Pearson, who is an associate professor, her son, who is an associate professor of architecture at the University of Oklahoma. Her award-winning scholarship explores intersections of design, community identity, heritage, and sustainability. She has published several books on architecture and heritage environments, and her work has been supported by the Smithsonian Institution, National Building Museum, Graham Foundation, and National Endowment for the Arts. Please join me in welcoming Angela. Next is Dr. Stephanie Pilot, who is a professor of architecture at the University of Oklahoma. She is a designer and architectural historian whose teaching and research examines points of intersection between politics and architecture. Her research has been generously supported by a Fulbright Scholarship, a Rowan Prize from the American Academy, a Wilsonian FIU Fellowship, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Welcome, Stephanie. And our last curator I'm introducing this evening is Marco Piscitelli, who is a lecturer in architecture and interior design at the University of Oklahoma. He is a registered architect and educator whose teaching and research explores the entanglements between building technologies and ecologies. Piscitelli's research has been generously supported by the Graham Foundation and the Bruce Goff Chair of Creative Architecture. Please join me in welcoming Marco.
All right, thank you so much, Trent, and I'm just going to do a quick mic check. How is this for everyone? Great. All right, so thank you all for joining us this evening. This is just incredibly joyful for us to be able to share this occasion with you. It's an honor to be able to share this history with you as well. Echoing Trent's thanks, and please bear with me, we have a lot to be grateful for. We want to recognize quite a few folks, many of whom are with us tonight. First, the Oklahoma Contemporary staff, past and present, have been a joy to work with. So if you're a member of the staff that helped make this possible, could you please stand or wave or something? We are so grateful for your partnership and openness to allowing us to pursue this wild project. And we're so grateful to our incredible students, colleagues, and staff at the University of Oklahoma who built the full-scale reconstructions and models in the gallery. Please stand up if you're a part of that OU staff team who helped. Thank you, students, especially. This also would not have been possible without the support of OU's Vice President for Research and Partnerships, Tomas Diaz de la Rubia, and his team, whose Humanities and Arts and Society Seed Grant program provided foundational support for the exhibition. So, thanks. And to our OU Libraries team, who meticulously loaned and digitized more than 100 precious objects from their archives, we offer our deepest gratitude. Michael and team. We're also also indebted to the many Oklahoma City-based vendors who helped bring this dream to life, including Denton's Framing, Scott's Printing, and 1419 Fine Arts Edition, just to name a few. And I know some of them are here with us, so thank you all. And we'd also like to recognize our college's leadership, including Dean Hans Wutzer, as well as the Director of the Division of Architecture, Dan Kabuko, and many other OU leaders, colleagues, staff, and students who've supported the American School Project with sincere enthusiasm through the years. So thank you. We're almost done with thanks, but I feel like the joy in this room, so I'm going to keep going. Finally, we must thank the architects of the American School for their marvelous work, as well as their friends and families who've helped us preserve their legacies and are continuing to do so to this day. And I know we have Leela Cohen in the audience for Green Cities, who's working really hard on this too. So thank you, American School Architects. And in particular, we'd also like to thank Sherry Faust, whose planned gift will ensure that we may continue uncovering new layers of the American School story for years. Thank you all. Now, I want to take a few steps back, especially for those of you who may not have visited the gallery yet and might be wondering, what is the American School of Architecture? Aren't all schools here American schools? Well, to understand the American School, we have to first understand Bruce Cohen. In the post-war American context, Goff was an outlier at a moment when architects and schools were embracing the international modernism of the Bauhaus. Goff was a renegade. Architecture critic Charles Jenks captured Goff's outré or bizarre status when he wrote, "Goff is so extreme that he makes the rest of the avant-garde look like a bunch of prep school conformists wearing the same school tie." Goff was known for projects like the Ford House in Illinois, published in Life magazine, projects that combined organic forms with local and ready-made materials. In this case, Quonset hut ribs. And he had become known for creating otherworldly interiors, rooms imagined as hanging pods with interior fountains and gardens, and homes with a strong connection to the natural environment. But Goff was also a teacher. He came to the University of Oklahoma after decades in practice, following his service in the Navy Seabees, construction battalion during World War II. After he arrived at OU, Goff recruited an impressive group of faculty, including Mendel Blickman, who was Frank Lloyd Wright's structural engineer, as well as Herb Green, Faye Jones, Dean Ballendorf, and others. These renegades, as we've come to call them, promoted a radical approach to teaching design, centered on contextualism, resourcefulness, and experimentation. At the time, architecture schools in the US followed a curriculum inspired either by the French Beaux-Arts or the German Bauhaus School. Here you see an example of a Beaux-Arts column capital drawn in the 1940s. OU students were doing exactly this type of work before Goff's arrival. By the post-war era, many US schools had turned to the Bauhaus model of architectural education. Susan King, curator of an American School exhibition at the AA in London, explained this phenomenon, writing, "In the minds of the Ivy Leaguers and big city critics, the jump was from Beaux-Arts to Bauhaus because it allowed them to retain their umbilical cord to Europe. The American School cut that umbilical cord." Goff himself never went to architecture school. He began practicing at age 12 as an apprentice in Tulsa. For this reason, the style of teaching he developed at OU was never modeled on existing European approaches. Instead, the OU curriculum emphasized individual creativity and experimentation. After Goff's work was published in Life magazine and other popular magazines, Goff brought students from around the world to study at OU. Takanobu Mori came from Japan to study in the US, first with Frank Lloyd Wright and later with Goff. Herb Green left Syracuse University, came to Oklahoma after seeing Goff's work published in the magazine. Violetta Autumn came here from Peru. And many other students abandoned their studies elsewhere to join the American School. Bob Faust, seen here with his classmates in the studio, came here from Tulane. Donald McDonald, who's in the exhibition, came here all the way from Canada. At the time, the School of Architecture at OU was housed in an old Navy barracks. You can see the displays of student work here. Rick Hunter, an OU alum, described what it was like to arrive at this strange school in the 1940s. I arrived at the university, and I walked into this war barracks building on the North Campus, and I was just blown away. I was blown away by the interior, and what Goff had done with strings and painting things black, and all this incredible work up on the walls by students. I think probably within about 5 seconds I had decided this was where I have to come. And when they arrived, these students encountered a truly original approach to teaching design. They studied a wide range of historical precedents, and they found inspiration in everyday objects, the natural landscape and the designs of Native American tribes. So, you might be wondering, what kind of student work emerged from this approach, and how different was it really from what was happening in other schools? So it's my pleasure to pass the microphone to Dr. Stephanie Pilot, who will share some imaginative examples of these students' work.
When students arrived in the design studios at OU, they were instructed by Goff to start fresh. Citing the richness of the world's great architecture, Goff explained, quote, "I believe we should know a great deal about all of them and learn what we can from all of them, but forget it all when we need to create an architecture of our own. Do not try to remember," end quote. And you're looking here at an installation we did with these words, thanks to Michael Hoffner, Hans Butzer, and many of our students and colleagues at the 2018 Venice Architecture Biennale. And you can see it says, "Do not try to remember." So instead of imitation, Goff encouraged students to respond sincerely to the site, to the client, to the landscape, and importantly, to trust their own creative instincts. That idea was really radical at the time. To even suggest that a student might have the creative energy within them to find solutions to architectural problems was in direct opposition to existing schools of thought. To understand just how different the work at OU was from other schools, we can look at this 1957 publication. This is from architecture schools around the country at the time. It includes student work from 52 different American architecture schools. Each school got a 2-page spread to showcase their best student work. And here you can see the best student work from Harvard at the time. And if you look closely at this work, we might describe it as boxes of all different kinds. There's vertical boxes forming skyscrapers. There's horizontal boxes with courtyards carved out. If we look at another school, Virginia Tech, we find more boxes. There's flat roofs and ribbon windows. My favorite image is this one in the lower left, where a student has designed dormitories on this hilly landscape, right? Because it's Virginia and they have hills, unlike us in central Oklahoma. And they've taken one essential shoebox with ribbon windows and carpeted it across the entire landscape. Here's the Illinois Institute of Technology, where Mies van der Rohe led the school. And we see, the boxes being maybe broken apart a little bit here, but it's still flat planes, ribbon windows, glass, boxy architecture. And then you get to OU. Yeah. One of these things does not look like the others. OU's work, the student work is otherworldly, it's dramatic, it's organic. There's a student drawing exercise in the upper left that looks almost like the natural landscape has been put in a microwave and melted. There are no boxes here. Let me show you a few more student projects by some of the architects who are showcased in our show. So these are student works by John Marsh Davis, one of the architects showcase, and you can see here in this design for apartments, how Marsh Davis was designing architecture that almost melded into the landscape. It's hard to see where the building begins and where the natural landscape ends. These are student projects by Mickey Munich, another of the architects in our show, completed during his time at OU. And it's certainly a departure from those boxy forms we saw at all the other schools. Projects by Donald McDonald, and for the architects here in the audience, they look a lot like Zaha Hadid projects, who's a contemporary architect. This is a school he designed in the 1960s while studying with Herb Green. So these were not just paper architects, they also went on to build incredible projects. Herb Green, a student and later faculty at OU, designed this incredible house for his family in Norman, Oklahoma. How many of you have visited the Prairie House? Oh, wonderful. You know it's unlike any other structure on the planet. It is an icon. It is an original work representative of the incredible creativity of American school architects. And this is just one example of how these architects put their ideas into practice in Oklahoma. But many of them found their way to California. What drew them there? And were they successful in practice? To talk about that, I want to turn the mic over to my colleague, Marco Piscitelli.
Thank you, Stephanie. The American West has attracted migrants and transplants in search of opportunity and the chance for reinvention since the 1849 gold rush, and in many cases much longer. But more than the chance to reinvent oneself, the West also presented a chance to reinvent society, to create a new social order with rules or no rules, to literally build a new world, new cities, new roads, new bridges, and more. California and Oklahoma share a particular history as places where development was catalyzed and propelled forward by singular events. In California, it was the discovery of gold. As H.H. Brand described it, quote, James Marshall's discovery of gold at Coloma turned out to be a seminal event in history, one of those rare moments that divide human existence into before and after. 40 years later in Oklahoma, the 1889 land run opened the unassigned lands to white settlers and provoked mass migration at breakneck speed, literally overnight in many cases. This event also defined new before and after periods in Oklahoma history. In both cases, forcibly claiming the lands of Native American tribes, hundreds of thousands of rich, poor, displaced, hungry outsiders rushed into California and Oklahoma in search of opportunity. These settlements erupting in fast forward sparked experiments in nearly instantaneous community formation by groups of strangers from around the world. Cities emerged rapidly as thousands flooded into these two states. The California and Oklahoma migrations happened so quickly that the institutions and norms of American society needed time to catch up. Governments had to be organized, laws enacted, as towns, cities, and communities negotiated, the cultures that emerged retained that sense and possibility of opportunity to reconsider rules and traditions. These founding moments provided the conditions for reimagining, and at moments, as we'll see, for incredible creativity and experimentation. Outré West, the American School of Architecture from Oklahoma to California, considers the ways in which these two Western states have attracted ambitious and creative visionaries, given rise to new ideologies, and shaped the built environment. It explores work by a group of architects who were educated and mentored in Oklahoma in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and later developed groundbreaking design practices in California. It reveals a connective thread between these two sites, two states of the American West, through the architectural practices and characters which shaped them. Educated in the American school approach developed by Bruce Goff, and free of European dogma, these architects, often called renegades, iconoclasts, apostates, were taught to prize originality and individual creativity. And in California, they found clients and society open to these creative visions. They helped shape the built environment of the state home to California, of a state home to Hollywood, Silicon Valley, places that gave rise to so much of the culture and technology which defines our modern era. The exhibition showcases the work of 5 architects who made their way to California and left this legacy of practice, which you all saw downstairs. The exhibition opens with the John Marsh Davis section, which was curated by Hans Baldauf, FAIA, the founding principal of BCB Architecture and Interiors, based in San Francisco and New York. Come on up. The Viola Autumn section was curated by Dr. Rachel Julia Engler, a lecturer in architecture at OU. The Arthur Dyson section was curated by Christopher Luce, the Robert Wesley Teaching Fellow in Architecture and Interior Design at OU. The Ronald McDonald section was curated by Amber Sarmiento, the Viola Autumn Teaching Fellow in Architecture at OU. And the exhibition closes with the Nikki Munich section curated by myself. So now that we're all on stage, I'd like to invite Angela back to the podium, and we'll start our curator, Alan.
Thank you so much, Marco. First, I'd like to turn to Hans Baldauf. Hans, would you please introduce us to John Marsh Davis?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all here from the university and the Institute of Art here for hosting all of this. John was a son of Oklahoma, born in Altus in 1931. His family still is in agriculture here in Oklahoma. He came to OU in 1951 and graduated in the class of 1955. He quickly went to work in Oklahoma City, but then joined the Navy and spent a number of years in Japan. And I think that when you see his work, you'll really be able to see the influence of Japan and Japanese woodworking. And I think he was primed for that by the eclectic experience here under Bruce Goff that Stephanie mentioned. In 1961, he moved to Sausalito, north of San Francisco, and built a house and studio for himself, which the drawings of which are in the exhibition. And this became the architectural calling card that launched him on his career, which was a 45-year career building houses, wineries, all sorts of buildings that he wanted to build. And the notion of the rugged individualism, the outré behavior of the OU architects, you had to be approved to be a client of John's. He refused clients. It's a hell of a way to run an architecture practice. But he did it incredibly successfully, and he was part of an amazing group of people, both his clients, but all of his colleagues from Oklahoma. And one of the joys of working on John's career has been to get to know the strong connections that Oklahomans have had in California. And it's not an accident that Violetta Autumn, that Rachel will talk about, and Donald McDonald and Amber will talk about, all work together at different times in their careers. And so this is really a community of creative people who were ruggedly individual and denied that they worked together from time to time. And a really very impressive group of people. I was asked to point out one project that I would have you for sure look at.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet, okay.
Thank you so much. Rachel, would you please introduce us to, when you have a moment, to Violetta Autumn?
Yes, so
as Hans mentioned, Violetta Autumn worked together with John Marsh Davis as part of this Oklahoma mafia in California, but she was originally born in Chiclayo, Peru, the child of emigres to Peru from Eastern Europe. So she has her own kind of geographic history that she brings to this place and then to that place. And she was one of a small cohort of female students to graduate under Goff after having moved to Oklahoma to finish high school at Norman High School, which I think should be a real point of pride for anyone who has any connection to Norman High School. And then she moved to Sausalito after first taking a transatlantic voyage, during which return trip she met her husband, which is also quite notable. They moved to Sausalito and she set up an independent practice and a practice together with John Marsh Davis, and this is the house she built for their family in 1959. Her son Keller grew up here. She had her studio on the top, and she also was a painter, a designer, and later in 1974, first she was a planning commissioner for the city of Sausalito, and then from 1974 to 78, she was also a very controversial and iconic figure on the Sausalito City Council, where she made a lot of decisions that made people angry, but that kept the city probably what it is today, to some extent a charming place with open spaces, preserving some of its history as a fishing town and fishing and things like that. She died in 2012 in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You know that I was just Chris, could you tell us a little bit about Art Dyson?
My God, there we go, perfect, thank you. Yes, Arthur Dyson was born in Inglewood, California, actually the only Californian-born architect out of all of the architects in the show, in 1940. And at age 18, he was accepted as a Taliesin Fellow, training under Frank Lloyd Wright, and was accepted just a year before Wright passed away. And in that year, offhandedly, Wright had mentioned, well, your work looks really Gothian. So as soon as Wright died, he was like, well, I guess I better try to hitchhike down to Bartlesville and get a job. And that's exactly what he did. Got a job in the Frank Lloyd Wright designed Price Tower, working for Bruce Goff. And I think that's a great one for him.
Thanks so much, Chris. And Art Dyson designed over 700 projects, which is super rare for a small practice. It's totally.
Oh, and really importantly, he is still alive and still practicing at the age of 84.
Yes. I know Donald's practice is wild. Can you tell us just a little bit about it?
Is this the one? There we go.
Yes, Donald, so you're seeing a bridge up there, we'll get to that in just a second. He drove back designing that bridge. Donald was born in Canada in 1935, and he too is actually still alive and with us, approaching age 90. He graduated from OU in 1962 and went on to get a master's at Columbia the next year, and ended up in San Francisco, established his own firm by 1965, and he's been there ever since, still doing very well and still practicing architecture as he approaches 90. I would say that the thing that differentiates Donald from some of the other architects that we're looking at is he really has established himself as within the urban context. He's done a lot of infill projects, high-rises, and done master planning for entire city blocks. And actually, he personally credits one of the professors at OU, Mendel Whitman, with that strong foundation in structural engineering. And that is obvious in so many of his projects. From the arc, you can see downstairs, it's a residence that you can see the structure on the outside as well as the inside, all the way straight through to his bridge design, which is obviously, you can see the structural elements of that. Yeah, he has an amazing range and has just led an absolutely extraordinary life. He's an exceptional man who's led an extraordinary life, and that involved everything from involvement in Alcatraz with the Native American, the Indian, what was called the Indian occupation of Alcatraz, and still going strong today.
He's a well-known San Francisco character. People know him around here. Yeah. Thank you so much, Amber.
You're welcome.
Marco, would you please tell us a little bit about Dickie Munich?
Yeah, I would love to. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Dickie Munich was born also in 1935 in Joplin, Missouri. And originally he studied aeronautical engineering at Georgia Tech. But it wasn't until he encountered Bruce Goff in an issue of Progressive Architecture that he decides to make his way to Oklahoma, like many of these other architects, to study under Goff, Green, and within this American school tradition emerging in the 1950s. After graduation, he starts to practice in his hometown, Joplin, Missouri, in New Orleans for a little while, in Denver, keeping very close ties with Goff and Green throughout. But it wasn't until a trip to Big Sur, California, beautiful, stunning, transcendental landscape, that he has this spiritual experience while taking Gestalt therapy class at Esalen Institute. And after this moment, in 1971, he moves himself and his family to Big Sur and builds his very first structure there, a very simple, round, stone, redwood, and glass teepee, as he describes it, and builds a practice and a lifestyle, which he describes himself as, he's a self-described hippie, right? His structures are fascinating and challenging and surprising, and all of them really have an intentional, sensitive approach towards the natural landscape, which in Big Sur is not only very challenging to intervene within, but also highly regulated by state and local agencies. His work is also notable, in my opinion, for really robust structural expressionism, and he sadly passes in 2021, and we're very blessed at OU to have his entire archives at the library's special collections.
Before I pass the microphone back to Stephanie, I just want to say the stories we could tell about collecting objects in this archive is wild. Mickey's stuff was in a shipping container, starting to mold in California. There's no mold, Michael, it comes. And now it's here, back in Oklahoma State. It is just amazing.
Thank you, Angela. I'm going to invite each of our curators to share with us one thing that you should not miss in the exhibition. So, Hans Baldo, can you start us off?
Yes, I'm happy to. As part of this project, we were fortunate to be able to have the Weissman House, which is the last house in the section on John photographed. And it's an extraordinary house that occupies a ridge above Carmel Bay. And it is, I think, one of his masterpieces, particularly from the later part of his career. And because of the complex relationship that he had with the Weissmans as clients, it never was published in his lifetime. And so this is a rare moment, and it's also an extraordinary story of the family that owns this house now, the Hamilton family, who have painstakingly restored the house. Mr. Hamilton is a car collector, and it is restored to Concours d'Elegance car collecting level. It's extraordinary. But I think the reason that I would have you look at the detail of the house, and there are beautiful drawings that John did as part of the design process, is that wonderful pieces of architecture demand attention, and they invite people like the Hamiltons to come and it wasn't a rescue job, but it was a restoration and loving job that they've done to this house. And for me, as an architect, there's nothing more fabulous than seeing a piece of architecture brought to glory. And that Weissman Hamilton residence is that.
Thank you. It is exquisite. Rachel, can you tell us about something we should not miss in the Violin Autumn section?
Yes, with pleasure, and especially because it's a small section and this is a small object, so it's important to tell you not to miss it, I think. We don't have that many original objects from Violetta's archive, I think it's fair to say. And this is one of the only original things on display. It's this photograph, 8.5 by 11, of her son, Keller, black and white photograph, running up the stair tower of their house. And you can see the texture of the redwood interior, the paneling, you see a tapestry hung up. So you get a sense not only of these histories of place that she brought to the project and to all of her work, but also of the way that she lived her life in fully inhabited spaces. And I think it's really a rich object, and I hope you'll look at it.
Thank you. Chris, can you tell us what we should be certain not to miss in the Arthur Dyson section?
Yes, there's a lot to look at in the Dyson section, and you'll notice that a lot of this is very varied, right? While a lot of these architects have kind of a style or an aesthetic that they cling to, it's that kind of expressionist of the architect. Dyson kind of rejected that in favor of the expression of the client's, what he calls the inner blueprint, which he tries to draw out of them through a 31-page psychological profile that he makes all of his residential clients go through before he accepts them once again as a client. So projected on the wall is a series of questions that have been abstracted from that survey. So please take a sec, stand in front of it, read some questions, and try to imagine you're just trying to hire an architect to build you a house, and they're asking you these things.
It is a fun exercise. Amber, which of the many things in the Donald McDonald section should we be sure not to miss?
Okay, so I'm going to mention something similar to what Rachel said. There's things that are going to catch your eye, like the eastern span of the San Francisco Bay Bridge. But I would draw your attention to a rather small collection of work called the Starter Home that was a prototype that he unveiled in 1991. And I see it really as a culmination of his work in what he called cottages, these development pieces that built all over San Francisco, where he's been really interested in providing a path to home ownership and making homes affordable for people. And what's really unique about this is that it incorporates a concept which we all know as incremental architecture, where he has a little starter home, 300 square feet, that can either be expanded. You start with this little box that almost looks like a Monopoly toy, and if you're in an urban context, you can grow. It's designed to grow vertically, and you can add on to it. Or if you're in a suburban context, it can expand outwards. And it's just, I think it just really embodies the American school resourcefulness. And I do just actually want to mention, because I neglected to earlier, that Donald is actually the coiner of the term the American school. In the mid-80s, there was an exhibit that many of these people were involved in, the architects were involved in. He dubbed it the American school.
That is such an important point. Thank you, Amber. Marco, which of the many things in the Mickey Munich section should we be sure not to miss?
Well, I think within that section, the full-scale one-to-one mock-up of Mickey Munich's first structure in Big Sur, the studio, sort of does steal the show. But right outside, this incredible feat of engineering put together lighting, put together.
Right outside this incredible one-to-one mock-up of Mickey Munich's house, students built for us in the past couple months. Really proud of that. There's actually a slideshow of construction photographs that we unearthed from the archive. And what I find really fascinating about these construction photos, first of all, they never been published. And second, it really allows you to see not only how Mickey's structural expression was so diverse and so poetic, but also the complex site situations he as an architect had to overcome. So take a look at this construction.
So let me just say that again in case you didn't hear that. Outside the full-size mock-up of Mickey's studio, there is a slideshow being projected of construction photos of Mickey's projects. And those have never been published, and you want to make sure you take a look at those. I'm going to invite Angela back up to the podium to take your questions.
Thank you, and I think we have about 10 minutes for questions, and I believe that there are some runners going with mics. However, if there are not, I'm happy to run a mic. If we can see hands, if you have a question and need a mic, please let us know. We'll start in the front row. Just kidding. We have a need for a mic up front, or maybe Hans may have already.
Well, thank you all. That was really, really interesting. I'm curious, you will talk about their completed work that they've done in practice. But since the American school, we know, has such a profound impact on pedagogy and academia, I'm wondering if any of these architects had any roles in their careers returning to academia and influencing curriculum and pedagogy.
I love starting with Chris on Dyson, yeah.
Still not. This one's working.
Jamie, help!
This is on. We can just pass this one on the stages. We could. Yes, Arthur Dyson continued kind of the legacy of Wright in many, many ways. Returning to Taliesin as dean of what is now the School of Architecture, to essentially try to bring an element of radical building back to that program with kind of changing accreditation requirements in schools. And he's also taught at the San Francisco Institute of Architecture within the last 10 years as well. And he really cares for students, he really loves it. And one of the homeless projects in the Dyson section was actually constructed and kind of assisted in design by construction science students at Fresno State as well.
And Donald has also.
And I don't have as much to say about the history of it. I know for a brief period of time that Donald taught at UC Berkeley. Fritz, I think it's been a couple of decades since then, but he was involved with that for several years.
And I would also say that many American School of Architects, not just the folks in California, did feel this strong desire to spread the pedagogy and the experience because they felt that it was so positive. So Herb Green went and taught in Kentucky, Bob Faust in Auburn. We have all these histories that we could tell and explore and excavate about how the American school went on to really affect pedagogy around the country, which is pretty amazing. All right, I have the mic ready.
Second question, Usher.
Thank you all so much for all of your work with these amazing exhibits. I wanted to ask about any kind of interdisciplinary influences on students and their future pedagogy. I saw some 273 architecture 273 projections up, so I just wanted to ask about the role of the arts in general and also music and any other arts that had an influence on architecture and design.
I love that question, and Stephanie, maybe you and I can answer that together. I'll start out by offering that as you arrived, you heard a playlist, and it's a Spotify playlist that my daughter actually created, but based on Goth's own playlist that he played for his students. And so he would often have them listening to music and drawing and really feeling the music and getting, like, he loved this idea of combining arts and architecture. And some of his most famous projects, including the Bavinger House, were actually commissioned by artists. So the Bavingers were both artists, and he was actually an art professor at OU. And so there's really this really strong relationship between arts and architecture.
I would just add on the music side, Goff himself was a composer, and he used music as a teaching tool in really interesting ways. So he would have listening sessions with the students, usually after hours. He would bring them into a room together. He would introduce a piece of what we would call avant-garde music, like Debussy was a favorite, or Ravel, and he would introduce it to them, and then he would dim the lights, and he just wanted them to listen, not do anything else. It was almost like meditative. And a lot of his assignments used musical terminology to teach architectural composition. So you'll see things like rhythm, modulation, terminology being borrowed from music. He also created compositions that were both acoustic and visual, using piano player rolls, which I believe are going to be showcased in an exhibition opening next year at the Chicago Institute of Art.
All right. How are we doing for time? We have 4 minutes. This may be our last question.
Hi, just also follow just incredible admiration for you, your team, and this vision, and all the incredible support to put this together. So all of us will applaud you again. But then, okay, you've given us this amuse bouche because the American school, as you've shown us and alluded to us, is much, much larger than the people that we're seeing here. So I'm just wondering, is there a version 2, 3, and 4? Because wait, just a minute. But we think, you know, that Faye Jones or Bart Prince or all the people who are definitely in the school, is there a phylogeny that we could imagine that people influenced by? And I consider myself one of them. So I just wonder what, much, much later on, I walked by the Pollock House, our learner's house now, way at Belleville Elementary School every day. So I just wondered, can we expand the conversation?
Expand it tonight, or expand it in a timeline? We have probably 2 minutes. Yes, so this is, I mentioned earlier, I'm going to get a tiny bit in the weeds, but I think it's helpful maybe for you. I mentioned earlier the transformational gift of Sherry Faust. This is a $6 million gift that is going to allow, and I don't know exactly, maybe exactly not, but some millions that will allow us to continue celebrating this legacy and digging deep into the archives and bringing in dedicated archivists and researchers and have a curatorial budget to be able to, you know, pick an architect. I know that we have Bob Wesley, who's the first Black architect to be trained in the state of Oklahoma, who came to OU because he knew that Goff would accept him. We really need to make sure there's a book on him and an exhibition. SOM is doing a lot to celebrate his legacy too, but there's so many of these stories. They're all characters, and there's a book or 2 or 5 on every single one of them. And we hope this work continues for decades.
Let's hear it for Sherry.